Should we just continue, Charles?
If you would like.
Well, I know that, Charles. I'm asking.
Well, what do you want to do for crying out loud? How in the hell is that my decision?
You offer the. Here's how stupid you are.
Oh, dear God.
I'll say to you. I'll say about that. You say, well, it's up to you. Well, we already know it's up to me, Charles. Well,
at that moment, for God's sake, how am I supposed to know how you want to conduct the program when you've already said we're nearly out of time?
Oh, my God. Back here on the Bernie and Sid Show on 77 WABC. Heard everywhere in the 77 WABC app. That, folks, is how Charles McCord, one of the greatest voices in the history of broadcasting, how he diffused the tension. And I would say this, first of all, good morning to you, Charles McCord.
Just a minute. No, that was the dog. That wasn't... Hello?
What's that?
Wait a minute. Let me turn the radio down. Hold on just a second. There. All right. Good morning. Who's this, please?
Hey.
Hi, Charles.
This is Bernard and Sydney.
Hi, Charles.
How are you, Charles?
Me and Sydney.
Chuck.
Good morning. How you doing?
How the hell are you, man? It is so great to have you. So good to hear your voice. I swear to God.
Thank you so much. I really... Emma, quit licking me, damn it. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's the neighbor's kid.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you see that? You see that genius right there?
Bernie and Sid, I am absolutely great, and thank you very much for inviting me on your stupid program this morning. Yes. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, it is as dumb as ever, by the way. But I will say this: Bernie was on the other side of the glass with Lou, and for me at least, those 5 years at Astoria, Queens, I was in that studio with you and Don. And I was scared to death of the I-Man, and there was a little good cop, bad cop thing going on. So Imus would scare the daylights out of me, but you were like my dad. And you would always kind of diffuse inside that studio. I looked at you like, Charles, help me. And you often did. Sometimes you let me die, but you often help me.
I wouldn't let you die, Sidney. You're too sweet of a guy.
Oh, thank you. You know, Charles, we played that clip coming in, and oftentimes... It was true. The I-Man, he would set a table of tension is what he would do, off of which we would all play. And then a funny comment here, a funny comment there, and they better be funny. And the next thing you know, we're all laughing, just like as you did in that particular clip.
You know, it was so much freaking fun. And for 41 years, I sat there, even longer than you did, Bernie, I sat there with that guy, and it was an honor. I mean, who knew when we started out, after he came back from Cleveland, that would become one of the most important radio programs in the country at the time. And he was already establishing himself, as you know, as, my God, he was a shock jock. Well, we've seen that time and again before the word was ever, before the term was ever concocted. So he was just an astonishing individual from his entertainment side to the other side of the ledger, which was his extraordinary philanthropy to so many people, helped so many causes and so many people. It's really remarkable.
It was, but I often remember doing the midday show on FBN and leaving, sometimes late afternoon, and vivid memories, Charles, of you still sitting at a computer a good 10, 11 hours after the show was over, writing a bit that Imus wanted the next morning. He was gone. He was in Brant's limo. He was on his way home. But you poor bastard, you were still sitting there writing for the guy.
I know. I was shackled to that freaking computer.
And God forbid anybody spoke to you while you were writing. Do not speak to Chuck. He's not looking up. Trust me when I tell you.
It's exactly right. Well, somebody had to do it. Somebody had to come up with a couple of bits, but I was far from alone. There was Robbie Bartlett and you, Bernard, for crying out loud, Cardinal O'Connor, and all the stuff that you did. Come on. It wasn't a one-man effort at all.
Well, let me just say this. The brilliance resided mostly in Charles McCord. And I'll give you an example. At the end of every program on the Imus in the Morning show, we played a little disclaimer for the rest of the radio station. And this is something that you wrote. And it is short, but it is brilliant. This is how the Imus in the Morning show ended every morning at 9:59.
This concludes the entertainment and revenue-generating portion of your broadcast day. We now return you to the rest of your local programming schedule. An indecipherable embarrassment of broadcasting incompetence that compelled the station to subscribe to the Imus in the Morning program in the first place. The entertainment and revenue-generating portion of the broadcast day, the Imus in the Morning program, will resume Monday morning. Check your local listings for time and schedule.
That was a Friday version, but the Larry Kenny voiced it. But you wrote that, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Well, it was a fun way to conclude the program.
That was.
And by the way, it was absolutely honest. That
hold on a second, Charles. Wait a second. I was the guy that hosted the show afterwards.
No, well, what can I tell you? I said it was an extravaganza of incompetence.
I understand.
Exhibit A.
Listen, I remember I was like 8 years old, and my dad was a big Imus fan, and we're going to Poly Prep in Brooklyn. You remember, Charles? I told you this a million times.
Sure.
And we're in the car on the way to Brooklyn, and there's a bit that goes on, and it was called, I guess, Imus' history, or the history of I forget the exact thing. Make a long story short, Imus is banging some lady in the Hindenburg, and when he's done, he lights up a cigarette, and it was your claim, I guess, that that's how the Hindenburg actually blew up. And it was brilliant. I know you wrote those too, didn't you? You wrote all those bits, didn't you?
Yeah, quite a few of them, I guess, Sidney, if I have to admit it, yeah.
Absolutely. And they are very, very, they stand the test of time. They're hilarious. And Charles McCord, listen, you were with Imus for a long, long time, as you mentioned, 41 years, and you left in 2011. You left, and it seemed like to a lot of us who you're a very enigmatic guy, very mysterious, very an introvert, I would venture to say. You just left, and we were wondering, why the hell did Charles leave? And we never got an answer to that. Do you have one?
Your answer, you just said the answer, Bernie. 41 years! Isn't that enough? Come on!
It was
no, you know, it just seemed there were a couple of things going on in my life at that time that just made it it just dovetailed with a couple of other events that I said, you know what? It's time. 4 decades. It's time to make a halfway awkward exit.
It's like Nelson Mandela walking out of the prison in South Africa.
Just like that.
Something like that.
Well, that's what my career was with that man. That wasn't a career. That was a prison. Come on.
You know, but when you say stuff like that, Charles, that's why a lot of our listeners and fans of the show think that you left on bad terms. You never spoke to Imus again. You kind of ran to the hills and never looked back. And I don't know if that was the case or not, but that seems to be what most of our listeners think, that you ran away and had enough of them.
No, I'm a hillbilly. I went back to my roots. I went back to the good old Missouri Ozarks. And, that's a bunch of people back there or back here, I should say, who we don't talk very much. We don't, you know what I mean? We're kind of suspicious of strangers and all of that.
Right. Well, Charles, of course, was with Mr. Imus when he was local in New York. And then, of course, we moved from WNBC to WFAN, stayed on the same dial, but Imus then exploded. He got syndicated to Providence, Boston, Washington, D.C., around the country, and then a little bit later on, of course, morning TV. I mean, there's no bigger radio star at the time than Don Imus, and it was all because of, he was a revenue monster. He made money like hand over fist. They wouldn't even call a carpet cleaner without running it past him because he was such an important guy. But you were the brains behind the whole operation.
I think that's a little extravagant, Bernie, but I was just happy that, that I did. I know I made a significant contribution. I know that there was a certain chemistry that existed between me and the I-Man, whatever it was. Whether it was beneficial or toxic is debatable, but there was a definite chemistry that worked, and that stupid program did just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you came on board, Bernard McGurk, we had no idea what kind of a comedic asset and a savvy asset was sitting on the other side of the glass, and you slowly worked your way in, and it just became an integral part of that program. And it was wonderful. You're a fairly smart guy yourself, Bernard, as is Sidney Rosenberg.
You're making me and Sid Bledsoe. Except with Sid, you can't tell he's so
still
tan.
Yeah, still tan, Charles. Somebody said to me today, when you bring Charles on, you must mention these 3 names, and let's see how Charles reacts. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Alger Hiss. Whitaker Chambers and Richard Nixon. Those are the 3. Chambers, Nixon.
Why would you bring up those names that are right out of some kind of a demonic episode in my past?
Classic.
I don't need this now. Come on, Sidney.
See, this is the brilliance. I've since read all about Whitaker Chambers and Alger Hiss, and I now know why the I-Man was gripped by it, why he was so mesmerized by it, because it was that fascinating. Also, the big Thanksgiving bit. Hey, you guys coming out to my house on Thanksgiving? And Imus says, yeah, I'd like to come out.
Oh, that was so freaking lame, and it happened year after year after year after year. God almighty. It was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous, but it was hilarious.
So the question for you now, Charles, you were gone for a long time now, and we're sort of never forgotten. We really believe, when we say you were the man, the brains behind the show, we really believe that. But it's been a long time since you've been here, since you've worked with Imus. When you found out last Friday that Don had, in fact, passed away, be honest here. Your first reaction was to what? Cry, laugh? What did you do?
My first reaction was I just can't believe it. I can't. You know what? Very quickly, he was so sick. He had such compromised respiratory function for so long, and I knew the severity of it. And as did you, Bernie, certainly.
Yes.
I knew that day was coming, and yet I didn't know when it was going to come, but when it did, it just hit hard. I said, God, I can't, Don. I can't, I just couldn't believe it.
It was
really
jarring. It was definitely jarring.
Yeah.
Yeah, he suffered with that oxygen tank towards the end. As a matter of fact, I would say Mrs. Imus kept him alive a lot longer than a lot of people expected.
It was Deidre Imus's commitment, dedication, her research, her knowledge, her love that kept that man going operational long past his use-by date. Believe me.
Yeah.
It was all Deidre.
It's use-by date.
That's another funny line.
Oh my God.
It's another great line. So 41 years, it's almost impossible to encapsulate all that in one 11-minute conversation. In fact, it is. But we've asked all of our guests today, Charles. We've had them all: Mike Francesa, Chris Russo. We got Brini coming up. The whole gal. What was that one moment when Imus was really mad, or the one moment you knew you loved Imus? Is there one moment in 41 years that really sticks out for you? One.
I guess it would be when the first time that he started the ranch, and he asked me, I became the initial, he sold commemorative acres and commemorative bricks, and that went into the construction of the actual, the ranch house.
Right.
And my Charles McCord brick was the first one that went in.
Oh, wow.
And, I was kind of proud of that.
That's a classy response from a classy guy who, by the way, sounds exactly as he sounded 40 years ago on the radio. I swear to God, it's uncanny how good you sound, how similar you sound to you did back in 1978, 79, or whatever the hell it was, 80s, 90s. Listen, Charles McCord, we're out of time, but I got to tell you something. I know New York loves you, Sydney and myself love you, and we want to hear more of you. I wish you would come back.
I only get 11 minutes?
We have, you know how it goes. You've been in the business a little bit.
Supposed to get 9, really. We gave you 2 extra minutes.
This sucks.
Well, listen, you come back then. You come back. You hear?
I will. And just let me sign off as I do with saying, God bless the memory of that radio pioneer, John Donald Imus.
So well said.
Thank you,
Charles McCord, again, Nobody better, nobody classier on the Bernie and Sid show on 77 WABC. Thank you, Charles, and we're coming right back.